got you leaning over.
Thank you, Joe.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's stuff and I don't know what to press to make that stop.
Oh, you're testing your microphone.
No, I would not on purpose.
Well, I mean, that's what it's doing.
What do I
Do you
press?
hear a ring?
What did you press?
All right. So we are, we're recording and live.
All right. Okay, well, I'll call the meeting to order. Would you like to do the roll call, Eddie, or should I, since you're just on the phone? I'll do the roll call.
You sure? Okay.
This is the thing.
You're unmuted again.
All right. I'm
Okay.
unmuted? Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Okay, roll call.
Thank
You know
Mr. Schuler.
what? You don't have a mouse.
Oh,
I'm using this thing. I know how to use that.
Okay.
I just didn't know
All
what
right.
what those things were.
Well,
Hey, Dick, the meeting started.
Dick, right. We're doing a roll call, Dick. Mr.
Here.
Mr. Stitt.
Here.
Obviously, Mr. Shanwell is here. Mrs. Can.
Here.
Ms. Freed.
Here.
And I don't see anybody else. So we'll do that. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you like to join me? Wait a moment. I've got, okay. I have my flag. Okay, are we ready? I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the
To the
flag
Flag.
of the
of the
United States of America and to the
and to the
republic
The
republic
republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice
justice for all.
For all.
Thank you. Next step is to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look at them?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I'll just write that down. Okay. So we move on to new business. I'm responsible for most of the new business. The first item on the new business is marked as cemeteries. It had come to my attention that there was a new cemetery down on Locust Corner Road. And when I tried to research it, I found that it was a green cemetery. And the reason that came up is there was an article in Sunday's paper, or previous Sunday's paper, happy birthday to Cincinnati's best and only natural burial ground. And when I started to read about it, I found that it didn't have standard plots. You could walk along and flip a coin and go, I'd like to put my ashes there under this tree or by that little rise or whatever. And it just seemed, best word I could use is unusual. And I asked Eddie to have a look at it for me because I didn't think it matched some of the things I looked at in the ORC. And he answered most of my questions, but I still had a number of questions. I saw that it was approved in 2018. And I know, you look in our zoning regulations and it's permissible with conditions in a single family residential. But you know, what I've written in my notes is like a giant but after that. According to the ORC, the revised code, it needs soil samples, there should be a survey, the place should be platted, should be a means of identifying plots. There's supposed to be approval of neighbors within 100 yards. There has to be something to maintain graves and trails. I don't know if there's a trail in there. So I thought that we should at least discuss it. I mean, I do have a sort of like an end question, but I thought we should discuss it. So I'll go back to Mr. McCarthy if he's still there, and he could fill us in on some of the things. I know this was done before your time, Eddie. I don't think you were the one that was originally there when it was approved, but to me, it seems really odd or strange, or I have lots of other words that I could use, that we, the zoning commission, did not find out about this. And even, I don't think the citizens of the township, because I've been a regular township meeting attendee, I don't think that the citizens of the township found out about it. It's not dissimilar to what happened with the halfway house up the other end of Locust Corner Road, where permission was given for it and sort of materialized, and all of a sudden we found out about it when a neighbor complained that suddenly there was a halfway house next door. So would you like to fill us in on the history of it if you can?
Yeah, definitely. And I will also yield a little bit of my time to Loretta on this as well.
Okay.
She was here when it occurred, but it looked like when I reviewed it, there was it was completely compliant with all of our regulations. You know, they are required to go through an administrative process because cemeteries are permitted by right with conditions.
Right.
And those conditions are laid out in Article 4.06 of our resolution, which the permit was notated with those conditions as well, indicating what would be required to be compliant with the zoning resolution. And so some of those are, it has to be a minimum lot area of 20 acres, for instance. Chapels and buildings have to be set back a certain distance from property lines and that sort of thing. So the fact that our default zoning district, more or less, is the single-family residential district, and this is a permitted use permitted with conditions, the zoning commission wouldn't necessarily see that for that purpose. If it was a use that required a general business designation and it had to go through a rezoning, you guys definitely would have seen it, you know, as far as making a recommendation and that sort of thing. And I'll let Loretta speak to if she wants to add anything else in, but I will add, this is a good segue to another topic that we have on the agenda, which we don't have to get into right now, but the Amelia Downtown Overlay. That gets in, one of the key components of that is zoning commission reviews. So I don't know if Loretta, if you want to add anything to, if I missed anything. The only other thing that I would add is that the Department of Commerce for the state of Ohio is the umbrella regulatory agency for cemeteries broadly in the state of Ohio, and they have a certification program. So if you are a legitimate cemetery operation, you have to maintain an active license. And part of that license is you have to have a maintenance program in place for the facility. Now, what that all entails, I'm not 100% certain. Since we are a lower form of government, you know, it's kind of like us going to the feds and saying, federal government saying, I want X, Y, and Z. It's just they don't report. You know, the hierarchy isn't configured in that way. So they are regular, and their license is active. So I checked their license with the state of Ohio's registry as well. So it appears that they're compliant, but it doesn't take away the shock. I know that, you know, there wasn't a great way for everyone to know, but I believe that there was a meeting in 2018 where they did a small presentation to the trustees, I believe. I was not here for that, but I do believe that did occur.
That was not, the trustees were aware of them, but the meeting they held, they did an invitation to adjacent property owners, I believe in compliance with the ORC. And they held that meeting here in our building. So it was a question and answer period before they actually closed on the property, I believe. And so this zoning permit came through when Danny was here and I was here. And it was just seen as compliant. The property owners looked favorably on this use, and there was no reason to question or deny it as long as they complied with the state law, and it did comply with our zoning.
Does it comply with the state law? I mean, they don't have a road, an access road to get in. You know, they've got the shed, and the shed has two doors. Does it have a backhoe? Do they run around with a backhoe? Do they, you know, where do they place the graves? If it's not platted out, like an ordinary, I was going to say a proper cemetery, like an ordinary cemetery, and I can just walk along and go, oh, geez, let me go in that bed of flowers over there under that nice tree. How do we know that they're not within the 100 yards that it's supposed to be from the property owner?
But that
Stan?
distance is for structures, I believe. Therefore, if you had a scattering garden, that would not necessarily be a structure. Otherwise, it's all regulated by the state. So the township zoning, other than whether it's a permitted use or not, really has no, unless we had a concern or a complaint about those other aspects, it's governed under their license under the state.
But it doesn't have a hell of a lot of access. It's got a concrete pad that I could fit 5 cars on, and a little dirt track that leads towards the shed. And after that, I'm not going to go trudging around in the grass because I might trip over a headstone.
Stan, I will tell you, I did go trudging around. I went down there after your email,
right?
And somebody can answer this question, but the house that's to the left of it, is that a private residence or is that tied to that cemetery at all? I'm assuming that's
a private residence.
Okay.
And
so anyway, you go in, there is that concrete pad, Stan.
Right.
There's a parking lot that you can probably put, I'm going to say 12 cars.
Right.
And then there is a gravel road past the gravel parking lot that basically goes back into the property and makes a small loop around one section of it. Now, as I was walking around, there's also a path along the pond, creek, whatever the heck you want to call it. And then as I walked on the back side of it, there are, I guess they're property markers. They're stakes, and it says lot number 62, lot number 7, this and that. I did not see any headstones, but as I read the article like you did, it says that you might find a rock with, Judy Jones' name written on it or something like that.
Right.
And again, my understanding is, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, you can scatter the ashes right on top of the ground there and put a rock that says that's Judy Jones. But if you do a direct burial of the body, I think it has to be a minimum of 4 feet deep.
Right.
But I don't believe it has to be marked, probably on their plat somewhere, but I don't believe it has to have a public marker.
Yeah, Mr. Stitt, you're correct. They do have an approved site plan that basically has limits of disturbance outlined along the property. So you can't go within a certain distance of their boundary lines. And it's kind of the designated area as far as where burials may take place.
Now, the other thing I noticed is around the old silo, and I'm assuming the silo's on that property. By the way, Stan, you and Dick are the only ones here. Didn't that property come up about 8 or 9 years ago as being wanting to be sold? A developer was looking at it. It was going to go down over that hill.
Yes.
And something happened to it. But anyway, if you go around the silo,
right,
there must have been a burial ground there at one time, because there are the old white marble type headstones that go back 1800 to deaths of like early 1900s. And there's about a half a dozen or 8 of those laying around that old silo. So I wondered, again, nobody was around that you could talk to. I wondered if those came off the property, and did they relocate those, whatever's there up near the silo, or what the purpose of those headstones were?
Well, it was part of the Novus property, and
That's it.
They very well could have had a family burial ground there, which is also a permitted thing.
Right.
Well, there's Stan and Jeff. There's a lot of private burials all over the township where people used to bury their relatives on their property.
Yeah, and I just assumed that came off that land.
Right.
My concern is about this cemetery. They only have to bury them down 4 to 6 feet. And if someone's in a cardboard coffin that they're allowed to use, and we have a lot of wild animals around here, what is going to keep, and these people are not embalmed, they're not allowed to be embalmed. So what's to keep the wild animals from digging these people up again? And my other concern, as the body deteriorates, what is the surrounding properties? How are they impacted with the runoff from the deteriorated body?
Don, I can tell you, and don't ask me how I know this, but I do know that odor, animals, this and that, 3 feet's the depth you should bury something below so that odors are not detected by wild animals.
Okay.
I think that's my old Eagle Scout days, but you go at least 3 foot deep. And again, since these bodies don't have chemicals in them, they will dissolve up and basically turn to ash, just like if you put your dog in your backyard.
Well, I understand that, but are people aware on surrounding properties that this is something that may be
I would
dispensed or
assume
dispersed on their property?
I would assume that if you're going to buy property that abuts that a realtor has to notify you that you're buying property that touches a cemetery. I would
They
assume.
don't.
I don't know
I
that.
bet they don't.
I probably agree with Donna there. I put them in a class with another profession. My real worry was it's 43 acres. They've allotted 20, and that's the top 20, which is above the slope that runs down to the Hooden property and down towards 9 Mile Creek. If you start using the back of the property and putting bodies in cardboard boxes down there, and they rot away, it seeps into the earth, and it's only that, whatever the hell clay it's called, that the stuff could start eventually running down the hills. And
Really, Stan, there's nothing that's going to run down. I mean, the skin deteriorates first and foremost, and then the bones go.
Okay.
Yeah, but can't there be water runoff with what's left of them in there?
Yeah, but there's nothing that's harmful.
Well, it's all right if you're a cannibal, right? Sorry. My primary worry is I'm disappointed that it didn't get to the zoning commission, and I don't really think it got to the township. As I said earlier, we've lived here 17 years and probably only missed up until this Zoom boom nonsense, only missed 2 meetings a year when we're on vacation, and that's about it. And that was the first I heard about it when I saw the article in the paper celebrating its 1 year. And so my overall question is, do we need to relook at our zoning regulations and change it from being a permitted use or permitted with conditions to something else that makes it come to the front so that the people in the township are aware that this is going to happen?
I think that you make 2 good points, if I can pick up on those. One that Eddie and I were talking about earlier that just wasn't thought of at the time. It was just purely looked at from a zoning perspective in terms of whether it was permitted and, under what circumstances was it permitted. And knowing that it was regulated by the state, and the state did permit this type of burial. So there was not any other measure that we had for that. But one concern would be that what if this was a very desirable developable property? I know this was marketed as Misty Meadows, I think,
right, yeah.
when they were going to develop it into a subdivision. So you would perhaps not want this in some places where you had desire to generate a lot of revenue, because this is going to be tax exempt. Right. So that's one reason to be concerned about where it's placed, as is, and Eddie's going to speak of this, I know, when he talks about more zoning questions and overlay zones and conditional uses. I think that we don't have churches as conditional uses. They used to be just permitted by right in residential zones until churches became mega churches. And then everyone realized this doesn't look like the old country church and they needed to have more regulations around it. So I think cemeteries in general, it doesn't matter whether they're green or not, a new cemetery and new churches are things that should be conditional uses. And in general, I think the Pierce Code now has those as permitted uses by right, with very little additional regulation on that. I think that Amelia zoning, we were already able to incorporate that, correct it, or it was in their base code, but I'll let Eddie speak to that. But I think those are two very good points that you raise when you talk about the cemetery use.
Right. Well, I look at that property next to it, which if you look at to the left of Eddie's green line, there's the property, and people live in that house at the corner there, and they're just doing something out their backyard, you know, out of their backyard. There's the one with the white car there, that they've worked their way around at the back, like they're going to put some sort of work there. I'm not sure. It's awful close to the side of this. I mean, I don't know if the people are aware that, in fact, it's a cemetery over there. If that was listed for sale, I can guarantee you the realtor's not going to tell you that's an active cemetery, you know, 200 yards away. So you know, I think we do need to do something.
Well, Stan, I think what we need to do is, you know, and we need to look at our zoning resolution again.
Right.
And again, we're very seldom proactive. We're always reactive. And I think I mentioned that in the last meeting.
Right.
And I think that we need more, when people are permitting things that are kind of questionable, iffy, whatever you want to call it, we need to have transparency and let people know what's going in and the possible impact on the rest of the township. And we don't have that.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, that's my coverage of that. So, does anybody else want to add to the questions that we have?
I guess as a staff member, I would look for some direction in terms of what you recommend as a process by which we take certain things. I mean, just that we determine whether something is a permitted use that shouldn't be. And the day that permit comes in, we need to tell the zoning commission. And then what? I mean, if there's a permitted use and we're, you know, it's the same thing with these agritourism problems at the state level. Right. I'm not quite sure what the best procedure would be to give direction to staff in order to know what the expectation would be and where we would go from there.
I would phrase it something like the district is zoned as single family residential. Now, that to me conjures up putting a house that I'm going to damn well live in on that piece of property. The minute there is something else, even if it's a permitted use, an alarm bell should go off. Something like this, I mean, a cemetery, I think we need some process that reduces the amount of permitted uses. Even, you know, just, you know, run down the things that are permitted and either delete some or make permitted one of the conditions that for the cemetery, permitted with conditions. Condition number 1, it gets referred to the zoning commission. You could do that, I think, without a lot of trouble. You know, remembering the process here, we could make the alterations, we refer them on to the trustees, and they either knock them back or pass them. And the only time anybody ever hears about anything here is if it's a NIMBY product, you know, a NIMBY situation. People don't go to meetings. People only think about things when they're, you know, when it directly affects them. So, you know, that's, you know, that's what I would like to think.
I
Yeah,
like,
zoom out a little bit, please.
So Donna, did you work with conditional uses or are you very familiar with conditional use? Rather than permitted with conditions, there's something called conditional use. And I
Right.
think perhaps that's something that we could introduce into our code to control all those things that we're not sure fit as a permitted by right use anymore, especially in residential zones.
Okay.
well, I think the
So
thing we need to do, Loretta, is when something like this comes in, how do we know that they are following all the state guidelines? How do we know the state guidelines are being met? How do we know they even looked into the state guidelines of what they needed to do? I think this all needs to be incorporated with the permit, you know, that you have all of that documentation or whatever is involved in that along with the permit when it's issued. Because, you know, when, you know, once the permit is issued, we really can't go back and say, whoops, you can't do that. And that's, you know, seeing this in the newspaper to me was shocking. No, I don't, you know, somebody wherever, I forget where the church is located, and then they come out in Pierce Township and buy up a chunk of land and put on this cemetery, and nobody knows about it.
One of
Hey,
the
ask
other,
the question of everybody.
right,
I will say I was also surprised when I read the article. Was I shocked? I don't know if shocked was the right word, but Stan and Donna, you seem to be the two most. What is your biggest objection, that it came in without us being notified, or do you have a true objection to the cemetery?
well, my concept of a cemetery is like our cemetery. I mean, I'm 77, and cemeteries I've seen my whole life have been platted out with little 6x3 lots, you know, side by side, row by row. And you came in and you were buried in those places, and it was the sacrosanct area that everybody knew was a cemetery. This is a big piece of ground where you can haphazardly put bodies.
Well, it is sectioned out, Stan, as I told you. I saw the markers.
Okay.
And I think, Eddie, you commented that too.
Yeah, and so the main thing I'd like to add is I think I have enough guidance where I can bring back options next month on kind of what some common practices would be and what the general approach would be as well. So we created a conditional use permit process when we adopted the Amelia zoning resolution items, because Amelia already had conditional use permits in their resolution. Now those conditional use permits and this is across the board for other jurisdictions, conditional use permit, basically the Reader's Digest on it is it's a use that is probably okay in a particular area, but it's context sensitive and it really depends, and it needs more than just an administrative black and white review. It needs a context sensitive review from a board of people who can look at it and say, yeah, this makes sense, or no, this doesn't make sense, and maybe the landscaping is too light on one side, or X, Y, and Z, that sort of thing, and that goes through the BZA. But that's one option that we could take, and it sounds like, Mr. Shadwell, you mentioned, these varying degrees of different cemeteries, and that's the same thing with churches. There's a big difference between a church that has 1,000 seats or 100 seats versus one that has 1,000. But if you don't differentiate in your zoning resolution between the two, you just say churches, and you open and you're just wide open to a whole variety of different outcomes. Conditional use permit process can actually put it in through another layer of review where you say, wait a second, this is a residential neighborhood, 1,000 vehicles on a Saturday, Sunday sort of thing. It's not, the road can't handle it, and so on and all the way down the line. So I can bring back options, and we can chat about this.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it'll be a good exercise, and I do think it's a context sensitive thing, as you're saying.
Right.
Eddie, I think you have some really good ideas in there. Really good.
Eddie,
you.
now that you're back with us, you appear to be back on your computer. If there's one person, which is Karen Abori, Karantina, she had tried to log on. She had tried to get access and couldn't. And she phoned here and said she wanted to remind us that with a cemetery, if the owners of the cemetery, that this Wild and Woolly Cemetery, suddenly decide that they don't want to manage it anymore and abandon it, the responsibility for managing it falls upon the township. And
Isn't that the case with any cemetery, though?
most of the cemeteries are run by, like ours is run by the township.
Yeah, but
So
look at the
it's
one
already
down
run by
in
the township.
look at the one down in Anderson Township on the heck is that 4 Mile or whatever, where they always have the Boy Scouts come in and clean it up and do this and do that because it's been left undone.
Right. Yeah, but that's not my problem. I'm worried about this.
I realize that. I realize that.
Somewhere. Right. If right, you're just going to, we're going to have to maintain it. So we're going to have our guys go down, drive around and mow. Do they mow around the plots? Who knows? I mean, I guess I have to go make sure the shed's closed and drive in one afternoon this week when I have nothing better to do with my time so that I can get a better view of it. But it's really worrisome that it's at this particular stage and we've now brought it up. So if Eddie comes back with a list of things and ways we can change our regulations, I'll be happy to have that happen. In that case,
Yeah, I'll bring that back next month, and we can get the regulations sorted out.
Okay. Well,
Mr. Chairman, it's Fred Hayes here. I am a visitor, but I am a member of the BZA, and I agree with the general things that Eddie mentioned there and the processes. My question would be, though, that pre-COVID times, we had agreed that we were going to plan to revise the entire zoning resolution as a package and bring it back through the zoning commission and then to the trustees for approval of a whole new resolution. Where are we in that process? Is this another piece of that process, or is that process further off into the future? I guess that's a question for Eddie.
Yeah, I think that the way that the process, well, my understanding, and if I'm wrong, if I'm missing something, please interject. But we are everyone's been chatting about how we are definitely due for a land use plan update, just to update our general plan across the board. The last one we had was 2013, and through that process, a lot of issues will be born out of that as far as what we need to do to revamp and tweak our resolution in order to kind of bring it up to standard and address the issues that come up, because a lot has happened between 2013 and today. But that was kind of how my brain was working as far as a comprehensive approach with it. And now, of course, with Amelia having just dissolved, that was a huge component that was added on to our existing resolution as well. So that was a process, but there's going to be a lot of work to do to continue blending the two documents together, because as you guys know, the way that a township operates versus the way that a village or a city operates, there's a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of different problems. There's a lot of different varieties of regulations that come into play, and we have to reconcile a lot of those. And some of the other topics that we have on the agenda tonight get into that a little bit. The Amelia Downtown Overlay is one of them, as far as the making sure that we have processes in place for the complex issues that come up. And we're alluding to a lot of these issues where we're not as much of a rural community as we were before, and now we're getting a little more suburban, then we get a little bit more urban into Amelia sort of thing. And there's just more nuance to each project. And the projects that come down the pipeline, it just requires some additional review and revamping. So to answer your question, that's definitely on the it's on everyone's minds, and we are looking to get the land use plan updated and do it concurrently and get everything kind of rectified in that way, Mr. Hayes.
Do we
Hey,
have a
Fred?
time target for that,
Hey,
Eddie?
Fred, as far as the zoning resolution itself, that was completely amended on 9/11 of last year. So we have a completely new and amended zoning resolution. Eddie was talking to the land use, but one of your questions was, Fred, I think about the zoning resolution, and that was completely revamped 6 months ago. Just letting you know that.
Missed that. Okay, thank you.
But, yeah. It's available from Laura.
Eddie, can you move the map that you're showing back? There's two red lines for the property line that show, okay. The big property that you're just going up now with the little lake on it and the silo, when you come back down to the front where the quote unquote access road is, there's a piece that appears to go from across the road across to there, and they're driving through. The red line runs right down the little road. Who owns that piece? Ricky?
Well, let's see here. It might be an access easement through there. Obviously giving access to Janet Birdsall.
Right.
That appears to be the only person that gains primary access from that.
Right. Okay.
Birdsall.
So say that again. Where's the access, Eddie?
It starts right here.
Right there.
Yeah, but isn't that part of the cemetery, or does the cemetery start? Okay, I got you.
Yeah, the cemetery's yeah.
Yeah.
So that road runs right across there and then round the back of that house. And then
Keep in mind, that road's been there for 100 years, because I used to go down there and buy straw. That road has been there for, Christ's sake, 35 years probably.
Right.
Well, we can confirm that, Mr. Stitt.
Right.
I can go back to 1972.
Right. Well, can we confirm that they in fact have permission to drag their funeral hearses across that land? I mean, I don't want to just be hard to get on with, but I'm looking. Yeah.
It looks like it's on that map there, Eddie.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Like I said, that used to be a shortcut. I honestly think that actual drive was cut by the previous owners because they started selling hay out of a barn back in the back.
Right.
The thing you have to remember is Janet Birdsall that's Janet Novus. So I'm sure there is some agreement when
family.
She and her sisters own the property to have the access and be able to use it. I don't think that's a problem.
Well, I do. If it's sold to a church that's in Newtown, did they formally get permission to drive across that road, or did they just do it because the damn road was already there?
I don't know. I guess we'd have to talk to Janet and see what was written up.
Well, and I'm assuming that concrete pad that's out there coming in off of Locust Corner, because that's where the cemetery sign is located, is right on that concrete pad.
On that concrete pad there, right? Yeah.
This is 2017, which obviously shows that the pad was not there in 17.
Right.
And this is 18.
Right.
19.
Right. The pad's there now, right.
Here's 20.
Right.
So it was probably put in when that cemetery was developed.
Right.
Or started.
Stanley, I don't think we'd have any control over that anyway.
Okay.
That's not part of our thing.
Okay, well, I'll be quiet. Okay.
No, you won't.
That's not possible, Stan.
No, you won't.
Okay. Well,
that's what we love about you, Stan.
Okay.
I want to sell tickets for that, Stan.
Okay. Well, if everybody's happy with the process, we don't need to make a motion or anything on it, I don't think. Eddie will come back with some plans next month, and we'll rediscuss what we need to do if we need to make amendments to the zoning resolution. If everybody's happy with that.
Happy.
Hey, Eddie, would you zoom out farther? I want to see just how far back that property goes. Okay. It goes back pretty far.
Yeah, it's 20 out of
Because
the 43.
I was curious when I walked that loop.
Right.
I was curious how far down that actually goes because there is a creek back in there.
Yeah, there's Mr. Hunt's house down there by the look of it. There's a house down at the bottom, probably
Yeah.
Mr. Hunt's house.
Okay. Thank you, Eddie.
Yeah, no problem.
Ben's not there anymore.
I know.
Okay. Okay, shall we move on to the next item? Code enforcement. Now, I brought that up because I travel down like this corner road. I don't go down the future waste of $2 million. I don't go down Bradbury Road. I go down like this corner road, come back up to Nordike and go up Nordike or Hopper Hill, depending on where I was going. And there's 3 or 4 properties at the junction of Nordike and 9 Mile that can only be described as terrible. One of them has 4 or 5 used cars, which I know are not drivable. The house looks like if you touched it a little astray, it'd fall over. The second one along, it has cars up on the hill, it has things up into the woods. You go around the corner, first guy's got trailers, old things. I don't think you can get into the back door of his house because there's crap everywhere. There's a house next to that that's decent. House next to that they're renovating now. And then you come to what I only ever describe as the homeless camp. It's the 2 houses with a little parking, for want of a better description, parking lot at the edge of the road, because you can't drive over the bridge, over the creek to get to the 2 houses. There's always 4 or 5 cars there. One house had a tarp on the roof for a year. The other one's got a ladder that leads up to the balcony upstairs, because I don't think the stairs inside must work. That's how you get up and down, is up the ladder. It's just a shambles. And there's all sorts of little other things. There's been tents. There's all sorts of things on it. And I wondered, I don't think it fits any of our codes. And I'd asked about enforcement. So I'll pass that over to Eddie.
And just as
Yeah,
a point of reference, that house on the corner with the multiple cars,
Right.
that gentleman and a couple of the others, they were the main voices of opposition to the subdivision that Fisher was trying to build on Bradbury.
Right.
They were at every single meeting, and just an FYI, just so you can put a face to who he's referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you're right, Jeff. That's why I mentioned NIMBYs, because we've not seen them again, and
Until
there
something
they are.
happens on Bradbury.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
So,
something happens.
a letter, so I did go out and I investigated for the property that has multiple vehicles. It does appear that 3 of the vehicles on site are potentially dilapidated. And so we are sending an ORC letter on that one. The property directly on the corner that has the debris in the backyard, the trailers, that sort of thing. I have spoken to the property owner, and we are working on a formal letter to them, but they are aware of the situation and mentioned that they have some projects, but they understand that there's a problem. They're going to work to rectify that. And the property with the bridge, we have initiated enforcement with them as well. I've also met them out on the property and had a number of phone conversations with them. That's 3517 Nordike.
Right.
Some of the progress that's been made there, you're probably aware of the tarp on the roof sort of thing. There was like a blue tarp on one of the houses.
Yep.
They had some damage on the roof in the
2 years
skylight
ago.
area.
2 years ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it might be more than that. I was looking back. I think I saw it in like 2017 or 16.
Okay.
I don't know. But yeah, I know you're right. I mean, it's been a while, and they have pulled that off, and they fixed the damage that they had on the roof. But we also discussed the vehicles, general outdoor storage of debris, the broken fences, the broken walls, and all of those issues. And they're willing to work with us to get it to a compliant standard. So we're in constant contact with them, and they seem to understand that there's an issue. They're not in denial about that.
Hey, Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, but a car can be totally undrivable, but as long as it's legally licensed, there's nothing we can do about it. Isn't that true?
Well, if
At least
it's
that was always my
3
understanding.
Yeah, I think the standard is that if it's over 3 years old and it is inoperable, that's kind of the threshold. So
even if it's legally licensed?
Yeah, yes. So
Okay.
so for example, like with flat tires, if there's a car in the driveway that has flat tires, we'd look at that and we'd say you can't drive that on the street. It might,
Okay.
as you said, but you're also on a good point. You have a good point there where with regard to the registration and the licensing and everything. That is another standard that we use to say, if it doesn't have a license plate, it's as good as it being inoperable.
Right.
Because you can't drive it on the road. So we kind of hold the line on those various different issues. But as far as a vehicle that, doesn't have a transmission anymore, and the state hasn't caught up with the licensing procedure yet, we would still send a letter on that.
Right.
Eddie, how do you want us to handle these to you? Because I've got a couple thorns in my behind on 3725 9 Mile Road. I took them to mediation many years ago, and he's now has his junkyard back in his hidden lot. It's not total, the house runs along the creek. He's got junk cars. And when I took him in, he had 10 of them he had to pull out. And at 850, not that I'm catching up on these things, on Bradbury, the guy's got 4 junk cars in his side yard with tarps over them, which I don't think we allow. So, how do you want us to handle these? Is there a form we can fill out if we're out driving around? Are we ever going to get a code enforcer? I don't understand, we're trying to encourage development in our township, but we're letting so many of our properties turn into junkyards, and I don't know why anybody'd want to move out here. I'm sorry. Our gateway.
Anna, what were you saying on Nordike, or not? Where did you say yours were that you were concerned about?
850 Bradbury and 3725 9 Mile. That's
Okay.
2 of them.
Is 850 Bradbury that house right there on the wicked corner?
It's on the right-hand side going down the hill at the top.
Okay.
It's a white house, and he's got, it even looks like he's got an engine hoist in his side yard now.
There's one across from it.
So, there's a lot of properties. I mean, if you want us to write these up, tell us where we can get a form, and we'll get the information and we'll bring it to you. But I don't understand why we don't have someone riding around looking at deteriorated properties and being proactive if we want development. I'm done.
Yeah. No, I think that the number of enforcement actions we've taken has been very significant, but that doesn't change the fact that, there are some properties that are going to be in violation from time to time. But nonetheless, we do have a form on our website that you can submit complaints. You can also email me, that sort of thing. And we'll, of course, investigate any complaint that we get. We just need the address and kind of what the complaint is, sort of thing, and then we'll follow up on it. But other than that, there's no other legwork that's necessary from a complaint standpoint.
Well, can I make a suggestion, Eddie? When I was in zoning, every month when we had the trustees meeting, there was a recap of violations and where they stood and who was working on them. And I think that would be a good idea to start up again so people can see when the monthly meeting information comes out about what properties we are working on and what's been done to correct the violations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything to add on that, or shall we leave it and see what Eddie comes up with? I'm just waiting for them to try and move the cars from the first house around the corner on 9 Mile. God knows how they're going to get them out there, and they better not touch their little shack because it'll fall over. It's a very worrisome sight. For anybody, if you've not been down there, when you get to Nordyke, if you're heading down towards 52, better slow right down, because the little house I'm referring to is almost buried in the corner house, and it's sort of tricky to see. But I pass it every couple of days on the way to and from bowling, going up Hopper Hill, and you can't sort of miss it. And you sure as hell can't miss the homeless spot. Okay, I'm done with that. Okay, so if everybody's ready, then we should move on to the next point. I may have to ask a question on that. As far as I'm concerned, I thought Amelia no longer existed. So I wonder why this has been brought up. Betty.
What are you asking about, the downtown overlay?
Yep. Yeah.
So
Amelia, the village of Amelia no longer exists, I think, unless it's still playing toddly and it's still sort of dragging on and on and on. But my understanding was it is gone. And therefore, I wonder why this subject has come back up.
So, you're right. Amelia does not exist. It dissolved. But the reality from our perspective is that development did not and is not going to cease, sort of deal. And so there's a zoning framework in place governing development in that particular area of the community. And one of the really important components of that is the downtown overlay that they have. And that was envisioned in their land use plan, which we adopted as part of our zoning update in order to begin blending them into the township. So in order for us to have zoning regulations in a particular area, there has to be a plan for that area. And so our land use plan itself did not contemplate Amelia Village because Amelia wasn't part of the township in 2013. So we've defaulted to their village, the plan that was concocted before their dissolution, which has a lot of very positive components, and a lot of what it had envisioned has occurred and continued to move forward. And so one of the big parts of that is the Amelia Village Center, which I can show you. I don't know if you can see the. So the Amelia Village Center was.
I've seen the picture, but I have to wonder who Menelaos Trentafilu and Associates, right? Okay. When was this created?
This is from 2000.
From 2000, I figured it had to be a long time ago because we've lived here since 2004. And as far as I'm concerned, the store at the corner is not a Rite Aid, and there's never been a Rite Aid. It's been a CVS for the 17 years I've lived here. So I wondered how old this thing was. And my point is, why resurrected? Why is it being brought up again? I know it was part of their land use plan. Should we not move to make something, if we're going to do a downtown or a village center, like a center, why don't we put it at the center of Pierce Township? And the center of Pierce Township would be awfully closer to the Perrin, God forbid, the Perrin property. That would be more like the center of the township, or somewhere next to the Krogers, not way up there where there's no access.
Hey, Eddie, let me jump in here real quick and ask you a question. I would assume that anything that happens in the old village of Amelia on 125, something of that nature is going to be done in conjunction with Batavia Township, correct? Or whatever the township is, it's on the other side of the road.
Nope.
Well, it depends. I mean, we've offered olive branches to them, and we continue to work with them on an administrative level. But there's nothing regulatorily that forces them to work with us, that as a separate
Do they
jurisdiction.
have anything that you're aware of in the plans for their side of 125?
Yeah, so they adopted the zone there. So they kind of followed our path and adopted Amelia's zoning regulations as they were prior to the dissolution as well. So they're making attempts, it appears, to not be in complete, a complete 180 from what we're doing. But the purpose of bringing this up today is that there are a number of very large parcels right in that particular area of Amelia that remain undeveloped. And as you know, there's a significant amount of development pressure in that particular area with the Glen Mary development, with the Premier project, and so forth going through. Population continues to increase in Amelia, and the demand for services will continue to increase. So the downtown overlay is it's a tool in order to better review projects. Now, as you can see on here, can you guys all see the map now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So that hatched area there, that's the downtown overlay. You can see it runs from Floral to Oak Street there. And it includes the library, it includes the CVS and everything to that effect. What it doesn't include is the area across the street from Oak Street there. The unique thing about the downtown overlay is that any development that goes through that, commercial or otherwise sort of thing, commercial development, has to go through the zoning commission for review. So that's really unique. So that was how a lot of certain developments in Amelia that's how they review their commercial. In the township, you were just mentioning you didn't see the cemetery. Well, that's because the vast majority of reviews in the township are administrative. They come through the office. If it's a permitted use, they fill out a permit, site plan, architecturals, and the floor plan, that sort of thing. And if they meet the black and white regulations, they get a permit. So the downtown overlay ties directly to planning documents that basically say there is subjective criteria that are at play. And so you look at things like the access, you look at the building orientation, you look at the intensity of the uses, you look at landscaping, all these different factors that staff is very limited in what we can enforce. We can enforce what it says in the regulations, and that's it. When it starts getting into the gray area, there's significantly less sway that staff has. Well, if someone were to come in and wanted to develop one of these parcels and build, we'll just say, for sake of argument, just a grocery store, that would come to the zoning commission. You would have an application, a site plan, the whole site plan review package material in front of you for review. So you can actually have a discussion with the developer, and everyone can meet in the same room or on Zoom sort of thing to review. And the reason why this is important is because this is a very important intersection. Now, it's not the center of the township. It's not where the movie theater is and all that sort of thing, but it's nonetheless an important part of the community that already has a tool in place that provides another layer of expertise and input from this body. And staff's recommendation is to potentially expand that downtown overlay across the street onto these properties that are largely undeveloped, because there is a very strong chance that those will be developed shortly. And the last thing that we want to happen is for those properties to be developed and the zoning commission, for example, not have any recourse, not have any say in how that occurs, because it goes through an administrative process. And so that's the general intent. I think it's a good opportunity. It's a tool that's already in place. It's something that is a little bit different to Pierce Township, but it is something that we kept as a holdover because, government and regulation in Amelia, in the village, it's just different than in a township. Business is conducted a little bit differently. Some of the problems are going to be different, and so on and so forth. And there's a different as you guys know, that it's a different sort of community feel in Amelia, and certain areas require context sensitive reviews, and that's what this allows. But that's kind of why I put this on the agenda today, because I wanted to start the discussion, and it's part of the process of bringing the two communities closer together in a kind of in a logical, rational way.
I I heard several people over the last year since Amelia has been disbanded ask me about this. I grew up in northern Kentucky, and in Bellevue, they have, if anybody's familiar with Route 8 along Bellevue, that area has just grown exponentially as far as the amount of small businesses, and it's been very good, similar to what's happening on Front Street in New Richmond. With that said, somebody said to me, what's the possibility that could happen there? And I'll use the term Dora, that could be the next Dora area, because it would be ideal for that. And Andy, I don't know if you've heard any discussion like that.
You're referring to New
Bellevue Vets.
Yeah, great place. Played baseball there for years.
Yeah.
Well,
But from the Bellevue, just so if anybody knows, from the Party Source or Bellevue Vets all the way east, all the way to the city line of Dayton, all of Route 8 is a, well, they don't call it a Dora, but basically it's a Dora. And a lot of those businesses are enjoying a rebirth down there. It's kind of interesting what's happened to that area.
Yeah, Jeff. And the other thing that's similar to Amelia, because we go to some stores down there. There's no parking lot no parking.
That's the downside, right? In Bellevue, you've got all of Route 8 plus those little side streets to park on. Yeah, you don't have that in Amelia, unfortunately.
right. And not only that, but you've got 125 up the middle. 125 is already narrow. Those sets of lights there at the mythical Rite Aid with the gas station and the Walgreens on the other side of the road.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that should happen. I'm just bringing that up as a little preface to my question to Eddie. Have you heard anybody mention that, talk about it, or even say, hey, we should look into that?
Look into what in particular?
Basically redeveloping that area like a little bit of Front Street or Bellevue or whatever, to the shops, the little pubs, open drinking as you walk the 4 or 5 block area.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, no. So you guys probably recall we did a survey in August and we were just basically trying to get the pulse of Pierce residents and people in Amelia in general regarding kind of what's going well, what's not going well, what do you need in the community, what's working, what isn't, that sort of thing. And we received a lot of feedback. And a big part of that feedback was a desire for certain types of restaurants, meeting space, more events, farmers markets, those sorts of things all came into play and were part of the discussion. And people feel like they want a little bit more of like a walkable kind of community vibe in Amelia, because as you know, if anyone who's been in Amelia, I mean, if you tried to walk on the sidewalk, it isn't exactly the greatest experience in the world along 125 there. You almost don't want to turn your back to the traffic, and so these are a couple of the different things that we've heard from the community. In addition to this plan that we have in place for Amelia, it isn't necessarily all going to be applicable. There's a lot of things that happened or didn't happen, just like with any other plan. And so that's where it becomes absolutely critical for Zoning Commission in 2021 to be able to say, here's what makes sense or here's what's not making sense, until such point where we can get everything up to date as far as all of our plans, get a plan that incorporates both Amelia and Pierce together. Now, we also had the COVID impact study as well, which was a little bit more business focused for businesses in Amelia and as well as Pierce. And it included a portion of the Pierce corridor. It also included part of the Amelia corridor. But a lot of these same issues kind of kept coming up. The idea, the need for central gathering areas, better signage, more walkable, strategically placed parking areas so that, we can create an area that's more of a destination. The library, for example, is a great asset right in that area. It's something that draws people in. It's a nice facility. The same thing with the post office, and so on down the line. But it's a matter of pulling all of it together so that, you get out and you're going to the Oak Street and Maple. There's a reason to go there, get out, and maybe spend some time. But a lot of that is it's difficult to. It's a great idea, but the implementation is another component of it, and we need to have the tools in place to be able to enable the township to enforce regulations that'll not just make an economical project, but a project that makes sense for what the community is desiring.
Well, I want to hear that the community desires it. I stepped back. There were 15,000 people in Pierce Township. We've added 3,600. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that the 3,600 should be driving necessarily the development for the township. We have a big empty parcel of land adjacent to the theater there that even though Perrin owns it, that would be an ideal place for this sort of development. I mean, I look at the picture that you supplied of buildings that look like they came out of the bloody 1920s. And then I look at the description of the property. It's got a police and a fire station in it. They've moved the post office from where it was back up on South Village Avenue down to there. None of that should be happening in the future. Certainly not putting a police station there, and certainly not moving the post office. So that reduces this giant figure eight. And the mythical Village Parkway never happened. It's not going to go from Ponscum Road there, or Pondview Road, whatever the hell it is, and drive through the back of Pommett's house and take away his railway station and come out up there. That's not going to happen. So all of it to me is mythical. So that's why I wanted everybody to chime in. Do we need to maybe vote to delete this as a plan?
Actually, I think what you're making is the case for what Eddie wants to do, because he's giving us more control over what is permitted. And I would actually probably argue that most of that dark blue section needs to be hatched, that we have actual more say in what goes in there.
Yeah, Ms. Freedy, I mean, you make that's exactly kind of what I'm thinking is that, Mr. Shadwell, you bring up a lot of valid concerns, and, a lot of what's in the plan for sure is outdated, not completely relevant, that whole thing. But in the interim, it just happens to be the only thing that we really had in order to justify not having the Wild Wild West in Amelia, because we needed it in order to establish the zoning until such time as we can get all of our land use plan stuff updated. But in the interim, as Ms. Freedy articulated, I think it's advisable, because one thing that is strong in the plan is it advocates for more zoning commission control over these sorts of incremental projects, and I think that would aid in sort of all these different contextually sensitive issues that you're bringing up.
Well, to me, if any of those parcels come up and somebody comes in with a development plan, provided it comes to us and it doesn't just get done because it's in this mythical 20-year-old plan, I'd be happy with that. I mean, Susan has a point. We went to the trouble to amalgamate their zoning regulations into our regulations, but at the end of the day, if this was a plan that was developed by Toddley or whoever it was that built the Taj Mahal on the other side of the road, or all of those things, I want them to be run by Pierce Township.
But I don't think we have to do the plan that's there. This just gives us the right to review it. If you took this off, they could probably go Wild West and do everything you're talking about, because without any zoning commission rules. Is that fair, Eddie?
Yeah, that's spot on. So if you look at some of the commercial zoning that's already on the ground there, for instance, if it doesn't have a hatch over it, an applicant could come in tomorrow and look at the permitted uses, submit a site plan application, everything. The zoning commission would never know about it. They don't have to rezone the property. It's because it's already zoned commercial, just like elsewhere along the corridor that is zoned general business, for example. See all the red here at White Oak and Lewis? That doesn't have to be rezoned anymore. And that's part of, and again, this is another segue into the kind of the last little bit of our conversation here with like used car lots, automotive repair, auto body shops, all these sorts of things. These uses are frequently permitted by right in these red areas of the township, for instance. So they come into the office, they look at the zoning resolution, they say, oh, it's got a P next to it, it's permitted. They can move in, and that's how it works, you know that. So again,
there's no hash marks over that blue area, Eddie, right? I said
sorry?
there's no hash marks over the blue area. So again, the blue area right there falls into that same thing as the red area.
Right.
That's exactly right. And there are limitations to all of this. It's just a matter of, and we don't have anybody breathing down our necks right now to build some monstrosity or something necessarily. But we just want to make sure that we have some ability to be flexible, to be agile with this. So, because we do know for sure that the market is roaring right now for a lot of different things. I mean, particularly with all this reopening and the demand for houses, the amount of new rooftops we're getting in the township generally and in Amelia. It's just a matter of time until these undeveloped parcels that are in a very centralized location start to generate significant amounts of interest. And I think it's important that the zoning commission be part of those conversations as opposed to finding out on the back end sort of thing. So that's where this all kind of comes from.
So Eddie, are you going to put something together to change all of this, to get us started moving to bring this more in alignment to what Pierce Township allows? And I still have to use Amelia and Pierce because, what they allow in zoning is so much more lenient than what Pierce Township does.
Yeah, and you guys made a lot of so when we did the first initial, it was basically we need to make necessary changes so that this is not out of control, but we also need to do it in a timely manner to get things on the books. Amelia does have a lot of things that I think we keep calling it Amelia. It's Pierce Township, but it's like the Amelia neighborhood.
I was going to say that
within Pierce Township.
I've heard it on the radio. They talked about there was something up at Starlight. Oh, they had a naturalization ceremony up at the Starlight Drive-In.
In Amelia.
All over the TV, the radio, everywhere. In Amelia.
Yeah, and
that name is never going to go away.
Well,
and that's kind of with
Jeff, and all of you, if you watch the news at night, Amelia used to be listed as an area on the weather maps. It's all gone.
Right. At
least they've gotten rid of it. We need to eliminate.
But what I was going to say was some of the uses that we were discussing earlier, some of the conversation we were having was that, we were differentiating between churches, for example, and places of like gathering places, and these different tiers of intensity. Amelia's resolution was these regulations are in place in Amelia in many places. There are a lot more stringent standards on certain, of course, the lot size thing, Pierce's standards with regards to a lot of residential property. I mean, it's a very different development that comes through from a residential PUD perspective. But of course, the zoning commission recommended approval of Pierce PUD regulations being placed in the Amelia neighborhood as well. So new PUDs coming through Amelia are going through the Pierce PUD process, and that same level of scrutiny and that same standard. The one area that is a little bit more disjointed and is part of the impetus for this discussion is that Amelia has a lot more restrictions on automotive uses and body shops, all those different sorts of uses. Whereas in Pierce Township, for example, that it's a lot more lenient with some of those sorts of uses. It's not to say that we're anti-gas station or we're anti-auto repair, but it's, again, it's a context-sensitive situation. You know, when you have a lot of road frontage and you're parking inventory up near the road, or it's, materials are strewn about, all those sorts of things. These are circumstances that I'd imagine that would be better reviewed through a conditional use or a more stringent process as opposed to just by right. Anybody who wants to open up a used car dealership just having at it sort of thing. But that's kind of the other aspect of this as well and we've already pretty much covered it, but I wanted the overlay in the automotive repair and body shop, that sort of thing. That was another use where I felt like it probably falls into the cemetery category as far as maybe a little bit higher standard for what passes as viable commercial acceptable uses in the corridor.
If they're more restrictive, Eddie, how do they have that body repair shop right up next to the bank, right in front of the post office on 125? I don't understand that, because that is a body repair shop.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with I've had the inquiry from a number of citizens, and I don't know that it applies to this case, but I've heard that, my suspicion is that maybe there were some, I don't know, I want to be as diplomatic as possible. I think that there was some enforcement issues, perhaps. I think that maybe there was, just because you have the regulations on the books, as you know, Mrs. Can, there needs to be an enforcement of those regulations. Otherwise, people are just going to continue doing whatever they want. I mean, you need someone coming in, sending those violation letters, reviewing the permits, and all the way down the line. And I think that they're doing it on a consistent basis. I don't know if that might explain it, but we also made some changes as well. But nonetheless, I mean, I think that might be part of it. But they're going through our office now, so it's going to be a different situation, and we are enforcing our regulations. So
are we going to enforce that on Beachmont Towing and get that piece of, pardon me, crap out of there?
I can look into it.
Where's that, Donna?
Beachmont Towing that has a junkyard behind it that's on White Oak.
White Oak, yeah.
It goes from 125. It's next to Super Sam's.
Tell me about it. I drive past it all the time.
Right.
When you try to do the drive-in window at Super Sam's, you have to put up with the stench coming from all the cars and tires at Beachmont Towing. Yeah. So Eddie, I'm feeling better about this. I thought this was a new comprehensive plan. I didn't know that this was 20 years old, because when I first got my packet and I looked at it and I looked at the picture that looks like Marymount Square with the clock tower and everything in it, I thought, pardon me, where in the hell did this come from? Oh yeah, and even too, when you look at as you dig into the plan, it's a significant document, but a lot of those are all broad brushes. In reality, you can put a lot of different things on a piece of paper and discuss it until you're, purple, until your face is purple, but things are going to occur as the market dictates and that sort of thing. And I think that the general vibe of the village center is to make it more of a community feel. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a plaza up at the corner of Oak and 125, or this, that, or the other, or
a police station or any of that sort of stuff. It's just the general focus area for a little bit more stringent standards of review. That's the general, I think, the general takeaway. And then it's up to you guys as a project comes in to interpret it based off of the reality and the facts on the ground, which are always changing.
You mentioned the police station, Eddie, and I've asked about this before. How much longer is the Amelia City, whatever the heck sign, going to stay up there? The city building.
Oh,
Well,
the Taj Mahal.
Yeah, we're working to dispose of the various properties in the former village. So I think that'll be the main driving process. I believe at a number of the parks, the signs have already been, or they're being addressed rather. But as far as signage at the police station, do you mean the signage on the facade, on like the wall?
Well, no, I'm talking. There's a big sign, that sits 10 feet off the road there. And I guess, do we own that building now?
It's in joint ownership with Batavia and us. Yes.
So we couldn't technically sell it to a business that wanted to put something in there.
No.
Okay.
It would have to be. It would just be. We're kind of. It's kind of like we're like an LLC or like a joint partnership with Batavia. So in the event that something were to come through and there were to be an offer, it would just have to be essentially agreed upon by all parties.
All right.
Well, my question, Eddie, I'll step right back, is can we make
and there are, as you guys know, it's a police facility, so there's a lot of documentation, equipment, and other materials that need to be reviewed and disposed of as well. And so there's a record process with all of that. But it's all underway, and the intention is to sell the property. So it's in process.
that you're talking of the Taj Mahal on the Batavia side of 125, right?
The property next to O'Reilly's. There's like a skinny parking lot, and it's right behind the CVS.
Right behind the CVS, okay.
Right next
Yeah,
to
it's tucked back.
It's that old building stand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Says something about municipal court or some craziness on it.
Okay, oh, that was where
That's where they used to get you for
Yeah,
your
that
speeding
was,
tickets.
I can speak to that. That was the former police department.
Okay,
Our police department has used it as a substation from time to time.
right.
At this point, we are getting prepared to market all the vacant parcels. We're
Right.
jointly marketing them between ourselves and Batavia Township. So all the vacant parcels are ready to go because there's no buildings and no contents.
Okay.
But all of the buildings, all the properties with buildings have to be processed and emptied. And that includes everything that had to do with running the business of a village. So they are still buildings full of contents.
My only point of that was, Loretta, and for everybody else, and it's kind of like what Donna said before, we're trying to, I think we're trying to get rid of the name of Amelia, and it's Pierce Township, but as long as that sign that's sitting right there behind the police cars there, and as long as Amelia's over the top of that building, it's like it never leaves. If nothing else, take the Amelia part of it down and leave, it can say police headquarters or whatever. I just think if we're trying to let everybody know that Pierce or Amelia is no longer Amelia with that sign sitting there, it doesn't help any.
Right.
I think if Eddie could draft an email to send to the department heads and the trustees that said that the zoning commission recommended that we black out or do something. I know that our police department's phone number should be on that Amelia Police sign now, so that people do know if they're used to going there, where they should call for service now. But
And that sign, that is on there, Loretta. It does say for police call. I think it says 732, whatever I think it redirects you to the
dispatch.
county non-emergency number.
Okay.
Right. But, it just in terms of all of the things to be taken care of, all of the obvious welcome to Amelia signs, I think, have been taken down. but those building signs probably the same on the Batavia Township side. We just haven't had staff assigned or come up with an approach whether that sign's going to be reused by another user or if we should cut off the top. I don't know.
I know it sounds like minutia, but again, it's Pierce Township.
I totally agree. There's just so many details that have to be addressed in order to finish the rest of this process. And I wish there were twice as many of us to handle all the things that really need attention right now between COVID and the dissolution of Amelia. It's been quite a ride.
Hey, I'm working from home and I own a chainsaw. I'll come up and fix it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Or just some spray paint. I don't know.
There you go.
Hey, that'd be fun.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, we're back to this beautiful little drawing from Triantaflu, which is a name that sort of rings a bell. What part of this do we make go away? I mean, that picture, that drawing that's 20 years old, that's just farcical. I mean, the Village Parkway doesn't exist. We're not building a we better not build a post office and a police station there. So the whole thing is sort of a farce. Can we just not eliminate it from the land use plan and change the designation of that property to something that we have control over?
You know, I think that we're at the point right now where I think that if maybe it's advisable to focus on the rezoning resolution, and then we are working diligently to get the entire land use update process up and running, where we're going to update all the land use research, input, and everything all at once. The land use, the Amelia land use plan there, where you see some designs and things like that. I mean, it's for reference. It's a guiding document. You're not 100,000% held to that. But in the interim, I think that the pressing issue is development that will occur and kind of come down the pipeline, that we get the regulatory framework in place that the zoning commission does support, which is potentially supports. Get that in place, and we can update. And we will also update the land use plan. But I wouldn't get overly hung up on the clock tower and things like that. I wouldn't sweat that too much, because if the development does come through and you are the review authority for it, you can make the interpretation at that point. It
will go away, right?
And we need the Fine Arts Center there. I like that designation too.
Where was that? Oh, in the middle there. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. Right.
Eddie, do we just need to move? Because what you want us to do is extend this district. So we just need to move to extend this district, right?
Yeah, and there's probably a little bit of review, and I want to work with you guys on the regulations as well, just to make sure that, because one of the unique components about these overlays is, it gives the zoning commission also has the flexibility to, waive regulations or hey, if there's a setback in those different sorts of reviews, the zoning commission has discretionary ability. So these are some important components where you guys can take all this data, information, everything in its totality and review. And so, but yes, moving to expand the downtown overlay, if that's what you're interested in doing, then yeah, I can bring that back to the next as a formalized product at the next meeting.
What do you mean by expand it? Expand to me means make it bigger.
It gives us more, Stan, it gives us more right on more properties to review. Right now, everything that is west of Oak, it does not have this overlay and could do whatever they want to do without us reviewing it.
West of Oak.
Okay, Susan.
That's that big blob. That's the big blob where the Silly Fire Station and the Marymount exemplar and all that nonsense is. Okay. Well, let's turn that into something that we control.
Now, wait a minute, Susan, when you say going west on 125, you're saying west of Oak Street?
Yeah, west of Oak Street, kind of northwest. It's that,
Yeah,
point to the area you want us to do.
Are you
Eddie.
talking
Yeah,
all the way,
that right there.
is that all of it, Eddie, or you want to continue past Glenmary?
Well, so the way that the plan calls out this particular area, the Palmer property, Envasom, and so forth, right in here. This is the premier property, as you guys know, right here.
Right.
You have the discretion to make the recommendation. I can present all the information you want. If you find that it's necessary to expand it even further, you know, you're totally well within your within the means to do that.
Well, but you're only talking about the land that was in the village. We're not talking about incorporating the Pierce Township part, correct?
No.
Okay,
Correct.
just the village of Amelia.
Just a portion of it. Yep.
The blue bit.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to go ahead with that
Okay.
because you never know what they'll come up with.
Right.
And then before we get away from that, Eddie, anything new on the Glenmary development with the building with blue paper flying off of it? Do we know any more about that?
I haven't had an update. I think the last that I heard, I spoke to one of the representatives of Prodigy. They said that they were generating interest from health facilities. They did not have a formal offer yet, and that it's being advertised without a listing price. And so I've got it on my calendar to follow up with them this week.
And
I still can't imagine anybody buying a house off Glenmary with that building in the condition it's in. I don't know how those houses will ever sell.
Well, they've started one, by the way, Donna, on lot 64, which is right at the entrance to Glenmary. They put a Glenmary post there, a nice, stone thing that says Glenmary, and they're building the very first house, which I guess will be their sample house.
Yeah, that'll be their model, but I don't know why anybody'd want to move back in there.
Well,
I really don't.
Certainly not if you looked at it as they're building it, right? If you looked at it as it's being built, you probably wouldn't want to regard that as a model home. But, but there it is. Okay, Eddie, do we need to make a motion to ask you to extend the zone that will give us control over it?
Yeah, I think that would be clean. Yep.
Okay. Well, then I will make a motion to extend the. Oh, how do you want to phrase it, Eddie?
Well, if you want to make a motion for staff to prepare the materials, and then that way I can put the application materials together for your next meeting, and at that meeting.
What are you going to call that?
What I'm sorry?
What are you going to call that area? Because that's several parcels of land.
Right.
You're just extending the overlay district, aren't you, Eddie?
Right.
Yes. Yeah. But theoretically next month, you would make the formal motion to initiate the application. And then I would take that and I would send it to the planning commission, and then you would have your public hearing and then the trustee public hearing.
Well, my point is, and maybe this is what Stan was saying, we can make a motion to extend the overlay area, but we have to say what we're including.
Right.
Do we have to individually name off those parcels?
Yeah, so you don't have to do that at this meeting. Right now,
Okay.
I was just introducing it as a topic. So if you want to make a motion to advise staff to prepare the expansion packet, I can put that together. And then at your next meeting, you'll have a map, you'll have a listing of the parcels and all that and that sort of thing.
Okay, at the next meeting, we can identify the individual parcels that will be included in that overlay.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, today was just big a theoretical conversation sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we ask the staff to give us a list of parcels that will be included in an increase in the overlay.
I will second that motion. And the only verbiage I might add is that it will be the parcels west of Oak Street.
Okay. Thank you.
In the former village of Amelia.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Okay.
You got that, Eddie?
I do, yep.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
By the way, Eddie, you said that then has to go to the planning commission and through the whole rigmarole. Oh my God.
So we have to have a public hearing and the whole 9 yards.
The whole rigmarole, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Property owners will be invited.
Yes.
Yep. And that's probably a good, it's advisable, I would say, to alert I've had some conversations with property owners in the area, and there doesn't appear to be any sort of significant opposition, but they obviously have a vested interest in their properties, so it'll be good to get input from them as well.
We also have to notify the residents that live in Batavia Township.
Why?
Across, yeah.
Because it touches their property. I didn't know. I'm asking that as a question.
No, you're correct.
Eddie, if it's across the highway, we have to notify them?
Yes.
That's what I thought, because it touches their property.
Yeah, parcels probably run out to the center of the road.
Which that's not a terrible thing, because it also, this ties in really well with what we were discussing before, which is, Batavia and us kind of playing on the same team sort of thing, right. Pushing in the same direction. It's helpful if they're also aware,
Eddie, are you sure about that it going across a state highway to the middle of the road constitutes a property that has to be notified?
Isn't there a distance requirement
Yes.
as it's written in the code?
I thought it was only 20 or 30 feet, not across
for us,
4 lanes.
For us, it's abutting properties. Although I don't know that this shouldn't really cause too much heartburn necessarily. I mean, I think it would be since they're in a different jurisdiction. I mean, it would be for informational purposes that they would be advised of it. But we do take a conservative approach when we do this as well. But as far as the way our regs read, I mean, it's abutting properties. It could be a mountain there. I mean, if you own you would own the contiguous property. That's how we approach it.
I didn't mean to cause a stink, but I just thought we had to notify them.
Okay. Okay. Well, Eddie will work out what he needs to do, and it will be done, and we'll work on it again next month. Okay, that should move us to the next item, which is a scary thought: brew pubs.
These ones, I won't take too much of your time with it. I just wanted to kind of initiate the discussions with these as well. Brew pubs are pretty popular, pretty hot, just generally throughout the area. And they really straddle the line between a restaurant and an industrial use. And so I think it would be advantageous for us to further clarify and define brew pubs, because it starts to get into a little bit of that gray area. And, it's all about production and what you're producing and that sort of thing. And so I think that would be an important exercise for us to dive into, and I can provide more information about it at our next meeting as far as how I would recommend differentiating that and making sure that it fits into our community seamlessly.
Have we had a request?
We do not have a brew pub request, no.
Okay.
I guess, I speak my piece. You all know that by now after 10 years of this crap. But I guess I would wonder, other than a parking issue, what's the negative side of that?
The big thing comes down a lot of times is like water consumption and sewer. They tend to be big users of just, utilities, or they can be. But no, you're right. I mean, as far as, the traffic is kind of the main thing, where if you start out as a brew pub and you're making 3,000 barrels a year, and all of that is consumed on site, that changes when you're making 10,000 barrels,
right,
and you're starting to export it. and that sort of thing. And so there's generally a line there that a lot of jurisdictions draw in order to.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions on the subject? Move on to the last item, which Eddie mentioned, the business district to include auto body repairs and automotive sales, et cetera, I assume, Eddie, you want us to review that and maybe eliminate the fact that I can put 25 cars in my front yard if I butt onto 125 and turn myself into a pseudo automobile shop.
Too bad we can't do something about anything called a dollar store too.
Well, I know
Well,
it's not in our township. Another thing, Eddie, while we're on the subject of this, Eddie, there is an old gas station. There's an old
Somebody's
gas
microphone
station.
screwed up.
Yeah, somebody's microphone screwed up. I don't think it's mine, hopefully. There's an old gas station at the front of the Kroger's that's now vacant. And it was my understanding that by law, a gas station after a certain amount of time has to have the tank dug up and removed. Is that one past its scope because it hasn't been used for a couple of years as a gas station? And I thought it was like 6 months or something. Do we know about that, Eddie? Or is that another enforcement issue?
well, right now I know the site you're discussing. It is vacant and it's for sale, I believe, sale or lease.
Right.
As far as the tanks, I mean, we don't have anything from a zoning at the local level here that forces anyone to remove tanks. But that's probably a state regulation, might be like an EPA regulation, but
Right.
I think it's worth looking into and figuring out.
Well, the other one,
the way that the regulations, so for us right now, if someone wanted to come in and open up a gas station there tomorrow, it's a permitted use. They could move in as far as zoning is concerned. So
The
what
tank's
staff
still on
was
the ground as
recommending
far as we
potentially
know?
looking into was, and you can see these uses highlighted in yellow here in the general business district, looking into those and figuring out if we want perhaps a little bit more onerous review potentially on those types of uses, so that they aren't just potentially permitted by right or permitted with some light conditions.
Right. Eddie, to your knowledge, are the gas tanks still on the property up there?
To my knowledge, yes. I haven't received anything indicating otherwise. No.
No, they haven't dug them up. They haven't dug them up, Jeff. The other one
I didn't think they
up,
had. I've been watching that.
Right. The Swifties further back up, they did some work on that 2 weeks ago, which I think was digging out the gas tanks. I'm not really sure. But,
that is what Eddie brought that up the last meeting. They are building a new gas station there.
Okay. Okay. He did? Okay.
Yes, I asked that question at the last meeting, and he stated that there had been, correct me if I'm wrong, Eddie, but a permit or something, and that construction you see on the right-hand side there next to the bridal place, that's going to be the new /store cashier's office.
Okay.
That's right, Mr. Stitt.
Okay.
So that's going to be reopened as a operable gas station.
Okay. Well, it was vacant for a damn long time too.
Yes, it was.
I always thought it was 6 months before you had to work on your gas tanks. But so Eddie, if you can look at that one outside the Kroger's, that would be good. Just to double check to see what the county/state requirement is, because if we don't notify the state or the county, I'm sure the owner won't. And there's no NIMBYs there to notify them. So, it has to fall back to the township.
I'm going to have to Google that word NIMBYs.
Sorry.
So is reviewing these types of uses in the general business district something that the commission is in support of doing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I
think-
can
Eddie, I think I don't know if we're allowed, but, you know, I don't think we need 15 gas stations in a row or, you know, all these Dollar General stores, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I think we need to have used car lots are the ones that drive me crazy. I counted them one time from 132 down to 275. It's an ungodly number. And it seems like more pop up all the time. And if we can do it, I think there need to be regulations that they can't be any closer than 2 miles to each other.
Okay.
I know that's an
Mel-
exaggeration, but you know, we can't have 95 used car lots going up and down 125.
Something
Okay.
else on your to-do list, Eddie?
You know, I'm here to serve. So, you know, and I brought this up too. So I'm asking for a beating.
Your fault.
I knew it was on your guys' mind, so that's why I brought it up.
Okay.
You know, I don't think any of us have anything against a gas station or a used car lot. It's just, we want something better for the township, make the township look more appealing. And if you've got nothing but a row of Dollar Generals, gas stations, used car lots, Dollar General, I mean, I don't know. It just, to me, it is not an appealing area to live. And I live here, for Christ's sake.
Yep, I agree.
That's why my original contention about an Amelia specialty district worried me when we have the big vacant lot adjacent to the theater that was going to be restaurants, etc., and make it a good groovy place to for people in the township to come to, and it's just sitting there. There's nothing.
Well, until the old man gets rid of it, that's not going to change, Stan, and you know that.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing is, this is our feeling. We all feel this way, but we don't know what the hell the trustees feel. They may not have a problem with used car lots, gas stations, and Dollar Generals.
Let's send them an email and find out.
Right.
Something tells me they're going to find out.
Right. Well, they spent.
I'm pretty sure they're going to agree with you.
Okay.
I think they'll
Okay.
agree.
Well, they spent the 50 grand of the whatever they want to call that money. They spent the 50 grand on the Tiger project, and it didn't tell us anything that we didn't already know. You know, they must. Is there a plan other than putting trees down the middle of 125, which is never going to happen, of course. So, you know, is there a plan to go talk to Perrin and Perrin's family to try and get development there, which is the ideal place for Pierce Township and the ex-village of Amelia, because it's in such an ideal place. It's three stoplights, traffic lights away from the ex-village of Amelia, and 7 traffic lights in or 8 traffic lights in from 275 would be an ideal place for development, which is what we'd originally thought before it got squished over just a crummy $250,000 for the entranceway. You know, maybe we need to go talk to them again.
Stan, you are such a silver-tongued devil. You ought to talk to the guy.
I'd probably lose my temper.
Oh, come on. You really?
Yeah. What can I say?
Well, I think, Donnie, you probably know better than anybody else. From what I understand, he's one hard-headed cuss.
You're right, but I'm not even sure he's still functional anymore.
Yeah, I don't know who it was that told me that somebody said that when he passes and his kids take over, they have absolutely no interest in that property, and they're anxious to rid it.
Okay.
So,
okay, that would be good. Okay, is there anything else we need to discuss, folks?
That's all I've got.
Okay.
make a
Let's
motion, we adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourned at whatever time it happens to be.
Thank you.
It is 8:22.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you, sir.
folks.
Good night.
Good
Right.
night.
Good night.
Night.